Listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our penultimate edition of Learning Pool Live online for 2015. My name is Lisa McGonigal, and I'm glad to see so many of you tuning in to join us this morning. We have the likes of South Wales Police, Yorkshire Water, the construction industry, training board, just to name a few. So I just want to check before we kick off that everyone can hear us okay. So you'll see a small orange hand beside your name. If you could just raise that and let us know that you can hear us. That's great. Thanks, Adam. Thank you, Alice. Great stuff. So today's webinar will explore how to design world-class learning with ADAPT. And joining me this morning are Content Development Project Manager Eoin Donaghy and Academy Manager Kevin Doherty, who have both been at the heart of basically creating content since the ADAPT first came to life. And without any doubt, they're both top of the class, even though they've been modest whenever I say this, in terms of evolving what ADAPT can achieve for content creation and e-learning. So the session should last approximately 40 minutes, and there'll be an opportunity for you to interact with us throughout. There'll be a quick poll to cast your vote, and you'll also see a question box down the right-hand side of the control panel. You just feel free to pop your questions on there, and we'll do our best to answer them online as the webinar goes on. So let's kick off things with that short poll. So we're asking people just to rate their experience with ADAPT to date. Are you a newbie? Maybe you feel as if you have a little experience, or you feel pretty confident when it comes to creating content with ADAPT. So we'll just give that a few more seconds. Interesting results coming in. Kevin and Eoin?
Yeah.
So we'll just show the results of that. So what we're seeing there is 47% of attendees this morning are ADAPT newbies, which is great. We have just under a third who feel as if they have a little bit of experience, and just under a quarter feel that they're pretty confident when it comes to creating content with ADAPT. How do you?
Well, it should be something for everyone. In today's webinar, we're going to talk about some of the newer features that we've added recently to the ADAPT Builder, but regardless of whether you're an expert or whether you're brand new, it should be interesting and informative for all, I think.
Good stuff, yeah. So now just going to pass the presenter over to you, Eoin.
Okay. Okay, thanks very much, Lisa. So, first thing we're going to talk about today is some of the latest stuff we've been up to in ADAPT. Anyone who's been using the ADAPT Builder recently will have noticed we've upgraded to version 2 of the framework. So basically what that means is that we've added a bunch of new features. So you'll have seen some additional fields and some extra little bits and bobs whenever you're using the builder. So there's now additional accessibility options, so you can create accessible versions of your content, which people will have noticed. There's enhancements to various components, such as we've put additional buttons on the multiple choice questions and matching questions, etc., so that you can now view your feedback at any time, which means it's easier to recall what you may or may not have got right, that you weren't able to do that before. You can add graphics in the accordion component items as well, and you can also embed web video into the media component, which you couldn't do before. And the big one as well is the assessment functionality, which means that you can set a pass mark to your actual e-learning SCORM package itself, and Kevin's going to talk about that in a bit more detail later on. There are some new extensions and components as well. Sorry, I'm just going to move this slide on. Such as the Stagger, the branching, the Glossary extension, and the Bookmarking extension, all of which will be shown today. And then, of course, there's loads of new content released recently as well. So we continue to upgrade all of our learning pool catalogues, adult social care and children's social care has been a big focus lately, and those are almost complete and should be fully converted to adapt very soon. We've also released the core skills stuff that people may have seen over the last month or so too. So that's a suite of about 66, I think, modules, which are pretty generic and which are relevant to all organisations, stuff like agile working and health and safety and performance appraisals, that type of thing. So they're all available for people on the catalogue and on the builder as well. So just to talk about today's session, we mentioned the glossary and bookmarking extensions. We're going to show those as two of the newer features. Also the Stagger component and the branching and assessment functionality. And then we're going to talk a little bit towards the end about some of the stuff that's kind of a twinkle in our eyes at the moment and will be coming maybe a wee bit further down the line. Just going back to the poll, I realise that a lot of people are probably quite new to adapt, and you know, they might want to see the basics before they actually see the new stuff that we've created. But what we would recommend is to visit the Academy, Learning Pool Academy, which is at academy.learningpool.com if you haven't already, and that should get you a good grounding and everything, you know, just the basic stuff of behind articles, blocks and components and all that. So to crack on, we're going to go into the builder itself, and we're going to go into this Agile Working course, which is one of the core skills courses that I mentioned just now. We're going to talk about extensions first of all. So if you go into your Manage Extensions area, you'll see these are all the extensions that have been switched on this particular course. So if I go into the preview, you'll see straight away, first one, scroll prompt, which is this little banner across the middle here, which is a little additional navigation tool that we've added to help people that might not have any great experience with deep scrolling content. And whenever you start to scroll, that disappears. The next one that you'll see is page footer navigation. So if we scroll right to the bottom of the page, you'll see you have the option of going back to the home page or onto the next page without having to go back to the menu page all the time. And you can set that up so that it appears right throughout the content or just at the very bottom. The next one's page level progress, which people will probably know a fair bit about already. So you can see your progress through the section just by this little progress bar here. And whenever you click on it, you can see all of the components within that section, which ones you've completed and which ones are yet to do. And it also works as a sort of a navigation tool as well. Whenever you click on one, it should take you straight to that component, like so. Tutor is an extension that we add whenever we've got question components within our content. So whenever you answer a question, you'll see that you get this feedback overlay telling you whether you've got it right or wrong, and you know, a bit of an explanation as to why. So that's what the tutor extension controls. Spur is something that you should have switched on all your courses. That's just something that adds in basic SCORM tracking, which allows it to interact with the LMS and track your users' progress through the module. And then resources is an additional feature that we've added, so that whenever you click on, you'll see this little icon here in the top right-hand corner. Whenever you click on that, you'll see any resources that you've added to the course. So it will be documents or web links or any media. For example, we've added a Word document in here. But the one that we're going to actually demo is the Glossary extension. So just these are the ones that aren't switched on in this course. Kevin's going to talk a bit more about bookmarking and assessment, and I'll mention Trickle as well. But Glossary is the one that we're going to switch on. So I'm just going to click on Add and then OK. And then you'll see the Glossary has now been added to this course. So if I go back to menu and go into Project Settings and then scroll down to the extensions area, you'll see Glossary has been added alongside the rest of them, and then you can start to actually add glossary items. So we'll add a few of these in just to show you how it's done. So the first one, we'll try and keep it relevant to Agile Working because that's the name of the course. So we'll go for hot desking, which we'll say where workers do not have an assigned desk. Probably a better definition of Agile Working, or hot desking rather than that, but it'll do for now. And then we'll also put in home worker. So say someone who works from home most of the time. That is as in they work from home most of the time, and not that they do work most of the time. So there's some additional fields that you need to fill out as well. So you can search within description text, and you'll see these whenever we come to preview it. And then placeholder text for your search box. So it'll just be enter a search term here. A glossary description, we'll just say a glossary for agile working. And then the glossary title, glossary, and then set enabled to true. So you want it to appear, save, and then preview your module again. So whenever you've made any edits to the structure of the course or put any additional extensions or theming issues or anything like that, and it usually takes a little bit longer to preview. But just to give you an idea, some of these extensions are available on the open source version of the builder. Others have been created by Learning Pool in-house and are available to all our customers who have logins to adapt.learningpool.com. Some of them, such as the scroll prompt, for example, and the page footer navigation, came about as a result of some feedback we had from customers. Maybe some of their users weren't so used to the deep scrolling aspect of the Adapt content and needed a little bit of extra hand holding. So that's where a couple of those additional extensions came from. And others have just come through our own experience here in the instructional design team as we've been building content over the past year or so. So we're just waiting for this one to finish previewing. And here we go. And you can now see whenever I click on the icon in the top right hand corner, you'll see that the glossary has been added as well, and then you can see the terms that we added in, and also where I've added these labels for search within description, and then you can search for any terms that are within the description as well as the actual terms themselves. So that's the glossary component. The next one we're going to show is the bookmarking component, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Kevin to take you through that.
Thank you for that, Eoin. So the bookmarking extension is a recent addition to Adapt, and it's something that we are quite keen to get active on a lot of the courses. Obviously, when a user goes through a course, they can very easily use page level progress to actually manage what they're where they need to go to complete the rest of the course. But with bookmarking, we now have the function that if they leave the course, then they will be able to just jump straight back to the content that they left off at. So in order to enable bookmarking on a course, we just need to go to Manage Extensions. Now I've currently set this one up, but all you would do is find bookmarking on the available extensions and click on Add. Once you can see it then on the enabled extensions at the top of the page, you know it's fully active, and you can just go back to Menu. We can then configure the actual bookmarking by going to Project Settings and clicking on the Extensions section on the left hand side. Just 1 second there. So 1 second, I'm just going to remove that bookmarking and add it again because it doesn't seem to be displaying there at the moment. So that's just the process of adding it. As you see, once you've clicked that, it will just appear back there on the Manage Extensions. So once again, we'll go back to Project Settings and click on Extensions, and this time we can see bookmarking's appeared again there. So when you first go into bookmarking, there's just a few default settings in here. There's the prompt buttons, which are the actual buttons a user will click on to say whether or not they'd like to go back to the place they last visited. So by default, no is no, yes is yes. Prompt message currently says bookmarking, so what we've been updating this to is, would you like to return to where you left off? So basically the rest of the settings are quite simple as well. We have the prompt title, which is just bookmarking, just to clarify what that is. Now, level is probably the most important part because that chooses where we actually jump back to. So we can jump back to the page they last visited, the block they last visited, or the component. In my opinion, I think the component's probably the best one because it will just jump them straight to the last thing they completed. And then we also just need to make sure is enabled, is set to true, to make sure that bookmarking is fully set up, and then click on save. Now there is one final step to do then for the bookmarking, and that is to actually configure it within each page, just so that each page behaves the way you would like. So to do that, if you just click on the cogwheel for your page and click on edit, and then scroll down, you'll have the bookmarking under the extension section. And on this, it's very simple. We only have the level. So again, we're just choosing whether it's the page, block, or component. And now the reason for this is basically you can set it up so that not every page will jump to a component or a block. You know, if you have an assessment, you may want it just to go to the very top of the page, so they start from the top again. So what you would do is just go in, select your level, make sure it's set to enabled, to set to true, and then click on the save button. So essentially, once you've set up all your pages with that extension, it is actually live and ready to go. So earlier today, I put the course up on one of our example sites, and I've entered it and completed some of the components. So I'm just going to show you now, when a user actually accesses a course, this is exactly what they will see. It will begin to load the course. You'll very briefly see the menu page before the prompt comes up, just asking, would you like to return to where you left off? If they click on no, it will just return to the menu page. If they click on yes, then it will just jump them straight down. As you see, we're near the bottom of this page, and it just takes us straight to it. So all the content up at the top is just bypassed as it's already been completed, and then the user can just continue to use the course from there on and complete it. So the only thing we would say is that if a user goes back to the menu and then exits, then it will return them to the menu because the bookmarking will recognize that the menu is the last page they left from. So it'll only work if they leave a page by clicking on exit activity, and then it'll just take them straight back to that section. So I'm just going to pass you back to Eoin now.
Thanks very much, Kevin. So that's a couple of the new extensions that we've added, glossary and bookmarking being probably the two that we demoed, probably the two that we think might be most valuable for people. We're now going to move on and show this time some of the new components that we've added to the builder. First one we're going to show is the Stagger component. So we've used this course, Understanding Adapt Components. Now again, this is one that anyone who has completed the Academy training will be familiar with. For those who haven't, it's actually a very useful course in that it shows all of the available components that you can use and adapt, and it explains them by actually using the components themselves. So it gives you, I found it very useful anyway when I was first learning how to use the various components, and a lot of people have said the same. It uses this new full screen menu that we've developed here at Learning Pool as well, which is pretty nice. So the Stagger component itself is a two-pronged question component, whereby the user needs to get a series of options correct, and then also put them into the correct order. So the example we've used here is the traffic lights. So first of all, you've got to select what the correct colors are for the traffic lights. So you'll go between amber, sorry, I think maybe one of these options is switched off. Just bear with me a sec. You can actually switch the correct answer and the stacking element on and off. And in this case, they're both set to true. So I'll just preview that again and go back in. And hopefully you should be able to demonstrate it. So yeah, just going back to what I was talking about. So it's two pronged. So first of all, you want the user to get the correct colors. So you'll be able to select between amber and then a couple of wrong answers, red and a couple of wrong answers, and then presumably there's going to be green in here, but we'll just wait for it to finish previewing and then we'll go back in. So here you can now see we can scroll between the correct answers and the incorrect answers. You have turquoise, pink, and green. So we're going to stick with green. You've got grey, amber, and blue. So we'll go amber, and then purple, pink, and red. So those are the correct colours, but they also need to be in the correct order. So you can change your green light and put that at option number 3. So that moves to the bottom, and then do the same with red and put that at the top. So once you're happy that you've got the correct answers and also in the correct order, you click on submit and you'll see that your answer is correct. So it showed briefly there the edit screen. So it's pretty much set up the same as any other question component. You've got your body text, which is the main question stem, and that's the part that appears just here. And then if you scroll down, you've got all your feedback, so partly correct, incorrect, and correct. You've got your 3 options, which if I click here, you'll see this is the first option, red, purple, or pink, and red is set to true, whereas the other 2 are set to false, so that red's the correct answer. And it's the same for the next 2 options, and the order in which they appear on the edit screen here, so red at the top and green at the bottom, is the correct order. And then, as I mentioned briefly before, you can actually change the component so that you don't need to have both aspects switched on. You can just have the slide-in mode switched on, whereby the user only needs to get the correct answer, or just have the order-in mode, whereas where the correct answers are already shown and you just have to put them in the correct order. But we think it adds an extra little touch for the user to have to get both correct, and that is one of the new components we have. The next one I'm going to show is the branching component, and that's been a big one for us recently. It's kind of been a holy grail for e-learning authoring tools over the last few years. And just to give you a bit of background about what a branching component is, it is a sort of a more complex scenario whereby the user makes choices, and each choice that they make has consequences, and the path that they take through the scenario alters depending on the options that they take at various given points. The course that we're going to show here is called Our Mission, Our Vision, and Our Values. It's one that we built just to promote the Learning Pool company values, but it also works well as a vehicle for the branching component as well. So if I scroll right to the bottom here, you may have seen a glimpse of this earlier when Kevin was demonstrating the bookmarking. So this is the branching component at the bottom. So it's set up as could you live the Learning Pool values in your day-to-day role. Take a look at the scenarios below, follow the instructions, and answer the questions as they come along. And let's see if you've got what it takes. So the user will see a video, which I'm told I'm not allowed to play because it might mess around with the sound here, but basically the scenario is that the phone rings and there's a couple of guys on the support desk, and it's 5:30 and it's clocking off time, and they're unsure as to whether they should answer the call or not, because one of them has got an appointment at 6 o'clock and it's 5:30 now, and he's in danger of missing it and all the rest. So once you get to the end of the scenario, you're presented with a bunch of options. So your choice is let it ring out. You've both finished your shifts and it'll get picked up by voicemail tomorrow. It's probably not going to be the right answer. Second option, let your colleague know that we always go the extra mile for our customers and that he should take a call. Could conceivably be the right answer. So if you click on that, you're then told, are you sure this is the best option? Click on play to see what happens. And then you get a bit of video feedback to basically tell you that you've got it wrong. And then you've got the option to retry again. And then the same 3 options appear. And this time we're going to go for option 3, which is let your colleague go to his appointment and you'll take the call for him. So we'll click on that one. We'll give the audio a go here just to see if it works. But it may result in a bit of feedback, so it may have to go off again pretty quickly. But we'll try it and we'll show you the feedback for the correct answer.
Customer is delighted that her issue is resolved. She gets her report in on time. Your colleague also gets to his appointment on time and thanks you for helping him out when he needed it. You go home 5 minutes later. but you've dug your mate out of a hole, and team morale is strengthened as a result. Good choice.
Okay, so you get an idea there of the sort of the video and audio elements that you can add into the branching component. So that's the first option. You've made your choice, and then you move on to scenario 2. So I'll just play this one and we can have a listen.
You are a Learning Pool customer and a keen author of e-learning content. You've been asked to develop a piece of e-learning on a new induction program being introduced at your organisation. You've got your base content and some great ideas on how to bring the content to life, but timescales are tight and you're keen to get started. The learning will be taken across the organisation by all new staff, including office-based and field-based staff, and should be easy to use. You're not sure about which authoring tool to use. You've used the Learning Pool authoring tool many times in the past with great success, but have heard great things about the new Adapt Builder lately. A counterpart at another organisation has also been using another tool that's on the market called Engage. Should you go for the Learning Pool authoring tool, Adapt, or Engage? What do you choose?
Okay, so when you can hear the audio, it kind of makes a little bit more sense, hopefully. So I'm just going to go with Adapt Builder as the choice here, because Adapt Builder is the correct answer to all of life's questions. And then you get your feedback.
You undertake the free intuitive online training
and you know everything's great and everyone slaps each other in the back, and then you go on to scenario 3, which is similar again. I'm not going to go through this one again. I'll just scroll to the end this time, and then the correct answer this time is say yes and give it your all. And then you get your answer breakdown. So here you get a summary of all the choices that you made at various stages, and you can also attribute points to each of those choices, and then the user will get like a final score at the end. There's a few bits and bobs that we're still testing out, and a few creases we need to iron out with a component related to this aspect of it, but we're just in the final stages of testing with that at the minute, and it should be released very soon. But just to show you what that looks like in edit mode, if I go into the actual branching component itself, you can see you have your question stem similar to the stacker that we showed earlier. So this is what appears kind of at the very start here. Could you live the learning pool values in your day-to-day role, etc., etc. You've got the option to display narrative text above the media. So this one is it applies to feedback more than anything else. So if I get the question wrong, then it's this text here. You can either have that appearing above the video or the video beneath the text. And it doesn't have to be video either. It can be a graphic too, because obviously not everyone's got the capability to make videos that they can just slot into their courses at will. You've also got the option to display media, narrative, and options full width. So that just means you've got the option to have this video and the text as full screen, and then your options appearing below. And then display media controls is set to true, but you can also turn these off so that the user can't actually scroll through the video and you're forcing them to watch every minute of it. But where it really gets interesting is when you go into edit items. So this is where the nuts and bolts of the component are. So you have scenario 1 that's at the very start. Your 3 options which come next, which are the let it ring out, let you answer it, or let your colleague answer it, those options, and these ones here. So then your correct answer is let your colleague go to his appointment, you'll take the call for him. So that then leads on to scenario 2, which again has 3 options, and then the correct answer leads on to scenario 3, which again has 3 options. Now in this particular example, each of the wrong answers is a dead end, so that whenever you click on let it ring out, you're just asked to retry. So you just keep retrying until you get it right, but it doesn't necessarily have to be set up that way. It can be set up so that even if they get the answer wrong, the scenario continues, and then something else happens as a result of the wrong answer. But obviously it will get a bit more complex, and there's probably a bit of planning and forethought that needs to go into this. So we hopefully we think that it should pay off, and if you're willing to put in the time, invest in a bit of planning and think about how the actual scenario will play out, even if the user does get options incorrect, it should pay off, and you should get a good quality component out of it. So that's the branching component. I'm again going to hand back to Kevin now, and he's going to talk about the assessment functionality, which has recently been added to the builder. And here's Kevin.
That's great. Eoin, thank you very much. We've had a flurry of questions, I know, and so we're going to take just a break here in the middle and try and manage them. There may be a possibility that we'll run out of time and not be able to answer all the questions live on today's session. But what will happen is any questions, all the questions, what I'll do is I'll summarise those on a learning document and share with the answers with all the delegates. So maybe there's questions out there that you haven't had experience yet to ask, or you haven't thought to ask. You'll have that learning document to base it on. So let me see. Samantha is asking, sometimes when she previews, she doesn't see the home and next buttons at the bottom of the page. Is this just a preview thing?
So if basically the home and preview, the home and next buttons that appear are part of the page footer navigation, and if you're not seeing those at the bottom, then basically what you would need to do is actually just go to Manage Extensions, remove the extension, and add it again. When you preview, that should come through. And if that's something that's happened regularly, just let us know and I'll speak with the development team. We'll just get a quick look at it as well, but they should always appear for you. But as I say, just remove and add, and it will go back.
Great stuff. Thank you, Kevin. James is asking, has Learning got a user guide for the branching asset?
At the moment, we haven't got a user guide for the branching component just because it's still in QA at the moment. We are just getting a few things tidied up. But when the branching component is released, it will also have a user guide put up on the main Adapt Builder user guide will be updated with information on the branching component, and we'll also have a video demonstration on how to use it.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. What about, someone's asking, is it the ARIA labels that have now started to appear in Adapt
Yeah,
Builder? So
with the recent upgrade to version 2.0, accessibility has now been added. And ARIA labels are something that's specific to accessibility, and essentially it's what gets picked up by screen readers. Now you will see this quite a lot in question components or any components that contain buttons. What we'd advise is within the specific question components, you can leave these blank, as your project settings do actually contain default settings with the values all filled in, and these will filter through to all the components. So you can obviously go to project settings and look at the defaults, and if you want to change the ARIA label there, then you can change it, but then it'll just filter through to the rest of the course for you.
Okay. Pamela's asking, is there a glossary for new users to identify all the terminologies that are being used in Adapt? Is there like a reference point on?
We don't have anything of that nature, a glossary, but as Kevin mentioned, the Academy is kind of the go-to place for all of that stuff. So anything that you want to find out more information on, if you go to the Academy, you'll find a wealth of different resources. There's lots of different PDFs and user guides and also video demonstrations, as Kevin mentioned. So if there's anything you want to find out, that's the go-to place.
Okay. Thank you both. So we're just going to pop over to Kevin again, and we'll answer any remaining questions just after Kevin's piece here. So
yep, thank you, Lisa. So basically, we're just going to take a quick look at the assessment functionality now within Adapt. Now, the way I look at this is there are essentially 4 steps to setting up your assessment, possibly 5, and I would recommend a 5th step, but we'll look at them all now. So the very first step is actually setting up your questions. Now, there's no change to how you do this. You set up your multiple choice, matching, any of the question components in the exact same way. The only thing I would say to keep an eye on is down near the bottom, you have this section saying question weight. By default, this will go in as 1. And that's your mark for the question. So by default it is set to 1, but if you do want to give a user 2 or 3 marks, if there's a few correct answers, you can do that, but it's just advisable to keep track then of what the maximum score will be. So when you are setting up your question components as well, you'll notice that we have 10 questions here, all contained within one article. It is a requirement that your assessment is contained within one article. In order for the actual extension to aggregate the score, it has to have it on that article. So once you have all your questions set up, all you need to do is go to Manage Extensions, where, as you can see, we have the assessment extension added, but all you need to do is click on Add from Available Extensions, and then it will come up to the Enabled Extensions. Once you have enabled the actual assessment, we just need to go to Project Settings, where we can click on Extensions, and then we will have our assessment specific settings. So if you're putting an assessment on there, then we want to make sure Require Assessment Pass is set to True. Otherwise, there's no point in putting it in there. We also want to add the pass mark. Now, the pass mark can be written, obviously we've done a 10 questions, and the pass mark is 8. Now, you can give the pass mark of just 8 and set percentage base to false. However, I would recommend to use percentage base and put your pass mark in, as for this example, for 80. The reason for that is that when the score is written back to the LMS does look at it out of a score of 100, so it does look at it as a percentage. Now, it is intuitive enough to know and work out if you were to use 8, but I just find that obviously with an assessment you want to make sure it's right, so it just makes sense if you can look at it in the Adapt Builder and see what the pass mark is, and you know it's the exact same on the LMS. There's going to be no difficulty in making sure it's all set up correctly. The final assessment setting on the project settings is send total score to LMS. We want to make sure that's set to true. If you set that to false and everything else is set up, you will still not get a mark for completing the assessment, as the LMS will not have the score written out to it. So once you have these four fields all set up correctly, just click on the Save button, which will just bring you back to where you were previously. Now that we've set up the assessment within project settings, the next thing we need to do is actually configure the article that contains all of our questions. So this is where the real meat of the assessment is set up. So to edit the article, we just click on the cogwheel and choose Edit. Again, we have the Extensions button on the left-hand side, and we have Assessment under here. There's quite a few fields within this. A lot of them are defaulted, but you can change any of them if you wish. So attempts allowed is obviously just the most basic one. Just how many attempts would you like a user to have? So for this example, I had set it up as 3. However, if you want to allow the user to continually repeat the assessment until they pass, you can set that to -1, which will allow infinite attempts. Reset and revisit is will basically control whether or not, if a user exits the module and re-enters it, it will reset the entire assessment if set to true. I would advise to keep this as false, as some users may want to partially complete it and may need to come back to it at a later stage. So at least that way, if it's set to false, they don't have to retake questions they've done previously. Assessment weight will default to 1, and what this is the 1 figure is what an assessment needs to add up to. It tells the LMS that this is the only assessment within that matters. Now, if you wanted to add an assessment to 2 separate pages, you can do that, but if you were to do that, the assessment weight must be set to 0.5 for each assessment, so that it equals a total of 1. Including total score, again, we want to set to true to make sure that this specific assessment is written out to the LMS. Again, pass mark, we just want to put in the same pass mark we had before, as this is what our overall pass mark is set up as. And again, we've kept percentage base set to true. Now, below this, we have our question behavior, which just determines what your questions do when you answer them. So show marking will let the user see immediately if they've got it correct or incorrect. It's an option entirely up to you, whether you want the user to know if they've got the question right or wrong at this stage. Show feedback will basically bring up any feedback you've put in for the question. We have this set to false, and just the reason being is it prevents the tutor overlay coming up regularly through the assessment. It lets them go through and answer each question one by one without any interruption. But again, depending on your own wishes, you can set that to true. Reset type is a new field which basically determines whether or not the question components are completely reset if a user revisits the course itself. Now, if it is reset, it just means it'll no longer count towards completion, so we would advise to keep that at soft, because it just means the user needs to complete a question that they feel they've already answered, and they may miss it, and that could cause problems with your completion. Randomized blocks and question banks are two new elements that basically allow you to bring in randomized questions and question banks. Now, it's a bit complicated to go through it now at the moment. However, with the new user guide coming out and with the updates to the Academy, we will be looking at that in more depth. So we can just ignore those fields, but then at the bottom we have Assessment ID. Now, this is a really important field, and you should give it a unique ID because we will use this in a few moments on one of our final steps. So I've just entered Managing Health and Safety, and just to make sure you've got it all, we can just copy it. And then the final setting here is enabled, and that is the overall assessment being enabled on the article. So as long as that's set to true, then we will actually have the assessment set up. So the final step, just to make sure our assessment is working, is then to configure our SPUR settings. So previously our SPUR settings were all defaulted. We knew the same values were being used for them all. With the assessment, this is slightly different because we want to make sure we've got the assessment writing out correctly. Now, just while I'm actually in these SPUR settings, I just want to point out there's this new feature, SCORM Debug window, which does let you view your SCORM and make sure it's tracking correctly. You may notice a little pop-up. If you do notice a pop-up and you want to remove it, just set SCORM Debug window to false, and that will take that off the preview for you. So for the SPUR settings, we just set up the assessment failure status. We set that to fail because that's what it will tell the LMS. Tracking success, we set to passed, so it tells the LMS it's passed. Store responses will just retain the questions that people have selected and make sure it keeps their answers there. We want to make sure submit score is set to true so that it writes out. And assessment pass is required must be set to true if we want them to actually receive a pass for it. The course completion required is whether or not the user needs to complete all of the sections or if they can complete the assessment without completing the rest of the course. Well, I would advise to keep that set to true because obviously if you've built the content, there's a reason for it. You want your users to go through it and then do the assessment. So we've set that to true. And then finally, we just want to make sure our SCORM is set to true. Now, when you click and save, that's your assessment fully set up, and it can be tracked to write back. Now, the final step, which would be step 5, is one that I would recommend, and it's a new component we've got called assessment results. Now, if a user was to go through and complete the assessment the way we have it set up now at the moment, they would have no idea what they've actually scored. They wouldn't know if they've passed it until they've exited. So what we've got now is this assessment results component, which you can just add to the bottom of your assessment. And it's just a little component where you can write in a score and you can give bands to say whether or not they've passed or failed the assessment. So when you add these bands in, I've just put a score of 0, which means that anybody that scores from 0 to 79% will get this feedback saying they've not passed the assessment. Anybody that receives over 80 will get well done, you've passed the assessment. And to enable that, we just add these placeholders for feedback and then telling them what they've scored and what they could possibly score. And there's a few other settings within here for the retry text and retry assessment. Retry text and retry button text, that's just the buttons that will be used for that the user will see if they need to recomplete the assessment. Now, on the article, we mentioned about making sure we took the assessment ID. Now, if we don't add the assessment ID, it won't know where to pull the information from. So that's just where we put in that Managing Health and Safety assessment ID, and then it will definitely show everything and the scores for the assessment. And then the final one is show before assessment completion. This is an entirely optional field, and basically it means the component will be hidden. If set to false, the component will be hidden until you complete the assessment. If set to true, they'll see the component, but all they will see is any text that are contained within the actual body field up here. But that will change once they finish it. So once you've set up assessment results, you can just click save, and then your assessment is fully set up and you're ready to go. You can just publish the course then and add it to your LMS. It is set up on the LMS just as normal. The only changes are you would set grade to highest grade and you would set the actual pass mark in the grade book. The only recommendation I would give anyone in doing an assessment is to make sure you always test it before making it live. So far we've tested them and we've no problems, but obviously once you have 20, 30, 40 users completing it and it's not working correctly, then it's a major headache. So always test and make sure you've set everything up correctly.
Kevin, thank you so much. There's so many different kind of looks into what has come down the tracks from Adapt even over the last number of months. even since Learning for Live, there's been massive developments. And I think this, how interested people are in those developments are indicated by the amount of questions that have come in this morning's webinar. Stevie Page has asked, let's see. So Steve's asked, will you be sharing the animations that you showed on the video? Eoin?
Yeah, I don't see why not. They are kind of specific to Learning Pool. They do demonstrate our own company values and make reference to Learning Pool, but if anybody wants to use them and if they want to make some particularly cheesy learning, then I don't see why we shouldn't be able to share them out.
Absolutely. And James has asked, with branching, can you add a picture or audio instead of a video?
Yeah, you can. You're not restricted to video at all. We have done a couple of examples where we've just used a graphic, or even you don't necessarily need a graphic at all. You could just use text. But for the purposes of a webinar, we thought we'd push the boat out a wee bit and show some video.
Wow, great stuff. So Mark's, good comment from Mark Wright, said with all these fantastic changes and developments, it's like to see them captured in user guides, which is fair enough. The team are feverishly working on those. He himself is going to be responsible for training all his colleagues in Adapt Builder, which is great to hear. And he's going to use those up-to-date user guides to help support him do that. And Mark's asked, when is the branching component going to be released?
That's the $1 million question. At the minute, it's still in testing. That is a very complex component. There's a lot of elements to it, and it's taken a little bit longer than we thought. So what you've seen in the demonstration earlier, as you can see, it's probably 99% of the way there. But we're just going through it with a fine-tooth comb and picking up anything that might potentially cause an issue further down the line, and just making little tweaks to it. We're hopeful that it will be in the next week or couple of weeks at most, but I did say that about a couple of weeks ago, so hopefully, well, it's not far anyway, definitely in the next couple of weeks, I think.
Good stuff. Folks, we are running on time. Thank you, Pamela and Naren and Tracy and Dominic and Marina. I promise that we will answer all your questions and share those with the team and share them with all our delegates that have attended this morning. So I just wanted to wrap up. There's only a few things to make you aware of. There will be a recording that will be hitting your inbox shortly after the webinar, alongside Eoin's presentations and a summary of those questions that we didn't get to answer. And there'll also be a survey whenever the webinar closes. If you just share your thoughts on this morning's session, it helps us shape future learning hours as we go into 2016, which is pretty hard to believe that we're just in the corner of that. Our next webinar takes place on the 1st of December with learning expert Donald Clark and Ian Usher. And for those of you who are interested in maybe using webinars as creating learning content within your organizations, Donald's going to share his 10 top tips to rolling out successful webinars. So all the details in that will be included on the follow-up email too. So all that remains is to thank you on behalf of Kevin, Eoin and myself for joining us this morning. Bye-bye now.